Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Board on a Thursday. I'm your host, Chris Burden. I'm going to be talking NBA free agency today. A lot of big things happening, a lot of players switching locations. Let's just run down kind of the short list of what's been going on. So, of course, Chris Paul a couple days ago got traded to Houston. Last night, Paul George gets traded to Oklahoma City for Victor Oladipo and Sabonis. And then you've got Blake Griffin. He re-signed with the Clippers, 5 years, $176 million. You've got Drew Holiday, 5-year, $126 million to stay with New Orleans, and that can actually go up to $150 million. And we'll get into more about that later. Jeff Teague's going to Minnesota, 3 years, $57 million over the course of that contract. So Nene is going to re-sign with Houston, 4 years, $15 million, I think. So a lot of things are kind of shaking out. The big name still is there, Gordon Hayward. Nobody's really sure what he's going to do right now. If I'm him, I'm looking at how stacked the West was already stacked, but now two of the best players from that conference, from the East, have now gone to the West in the past 2 weeks. Jimmy Butler and now Paul George. So it just makes that trek through the West even more difficult. If I'm Gordon Hayward, I'm going out East where all I really have to worry about is LeBron and the Cleveland Cavaliers. And who knows how long you'll have to wait on that. He might leave after this coming year. So that's what I'm thinking if I'm Gordon Hayward. Let's get into kind of what the Paul George thing means for the rest of the league, and we'll get into where Boston was during all this. So Paul George gets sent to Oklahoma City for, I guess, a 1-year rental. I don't know, who knows what could happen. Him and Westbrook could hit it off, and they could end up playing together for, 3 or 4 years. You never know. But all indications are is that this is a 1-year rental, and for Oladipo and Sabonis, that's a pretty good rental. When I first heard the news, I was thinking to myself, where in the hell is Danny Ainge? What is Danny Ainge doing? And the more I read about what's going on and kind of what they were offering, I don't understand what Indiana is thinking. Boston was offering them, before the trade deadline this past year, Boston offered them a choice to swap first-round picks, which means that Indiana would have gotten Brooklyn's pick, which ended up being the number 1 pick. They didn't know that at the time. And then Boston would have got Indiana's pick. After the trade deadline, the last offer that sources are saying was 3 non-premium picks, Jay Crowder, and another starter for Paul George. Now, to me, that's a way better package than what Oklahoma City's sending out to you. Now, my only question on that is, did they not want to face Paul George throughout the year 4 times? Maybe that's what their thinking was. I'm not really sure. But when you're trying to rebuild your team, the only way to rebuild your look, everybody's like, hey, look at what Golden State's doing. Everybody's got to replicate that. Okay, they did it through the draft. They didn't, they got Kevin Durant in year 3 of this thing, but they did it with drafting really well 3 years in a row. So that's how you build these things now. Philly has the right idea. They've drafted really well so far. We'll see how Ben Simmons and Markelle Fultz pan out, but every indication is they're going to be really good players in the league. Boston is now in that situation where as more time goes by, these assets become less and less valuable. So if I'm them, I'm thinking to myself, okay, do I want to rush out there, throw everything and get Paul George, which who knows, it might have just been a rental for them too. And in that case, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I'm not going to give you everything we have for, a 1-year deal. So hopefully they can get Gordon Hayward. If they don't get Gordon Hayward, then they've really got to start scrambling. They've got to add someone someone that I think they could add that would help that team that, wouldn't make them title contenders or anything is Rudy Gay. I think Rudy Gay's contract that they could get him for wouldn't be too high. And I think he's a guy that he can score. He's versatile. I think he really kind of fits with what they need on that team. And it's going to be interesting to see what Boston does going forward because they're kind of running out of time. You can only stay pat so long before you get passed by a lot of other teams. So, other news, Chris Paul a couple days ago got traded to Houston. Not sure how that's going to work out. Chris Paul and Harden on the same team, and here's why. They both are very ball-centric guys. They have to have the ball in their hands to make plays or to make other people better. James Harden is not a very good, he's a terrible defender. Chris Paul's a pretty good defender. And actually I think he was like NBA first team defense this year. So yeah, he's a solid defender. He can definitely make up for what James Harden can't do. But you lose Patrick Beverley, so you're kind of, your defense, who is already bad, got a little bit worse. Now, going back to Harden in Houston, I think that this helps them because now they finally have a clutch player. I don't think James Harden is a very clutch player. I think when the stakes are biggest and when the stage is brightest, he withers, and he's done it multiple times in his career. You think back to when he was at Oklahoma City and he was a basically no-show in the finals when they played the Heat. This past year, he had stretches in the OKC series where he went 14 of 38 in 2 games, 37%, 5 of 21 from 3. That's under 24%. And the only reason that in one of those games he scored 34 points, but it was because he went 16 of 17 from the free throw line. In the San Antonio series, he ended up with a stretch. This is 2 games. 5 of 28 from the field for under 18%, and then 4 of 18 for 22%, which means in 2 games he only had 1 2-point field goal. Now you tell me another guy who is considered a top 5, top 10 player in the league who can have games like that, and it's not a big story. If, every time anyone on Cleveland has a bad game, they're basically publicly shamed in front of the entire world because how could they dare let LeBron down? James Harden is supposed to be one of the top players in the league. He was second MVP voting this year, but this is becoming a reoccurring theme for him, is he can't, just whatever it is, whether I don't know if he's tired, I don't know what it is, but he has a tendency to wither and to crumble when the stakes are biggest. And like I said, without those free throws, we're looking at, he'd be averaging about 10 points a game in those games. So he also had, Russell Westbrook, whose team got beat in 5 games, he had a positive plus minus in 4 of those 5 games. James Harden had 1 plus minus of plus 20, and then the other ones were plus 2, plus 1, 0, and then he had one that was, I think, -6, and that was a game they won. So when you're comparing the two, yeah, Harden makes people better, but his lack of defense, it shows when you really start looking at the numbers, when you really start looking at all these things. And honestly, I think the Clippers were a winner in this trade because they were going to lose Chris Paul regardless, and they ended up getting Lou Williams, who's a really good player, Patrick Beverley, one of the best on-ball guard defenders in the league, and then I know they got some other pieces to go with it. They got like 6 or 7 players total. Sam Decker, I think, is another good player, and I think they got a 2018 first-rounder. So I think they made out pretty well in that trade. They were going to lose them anyways. So to get anything was a plus. And if I'm Houston, Not sure why they. I mean, I'm sure they had to for some reason, but that's a lot to give up for a guy that, you know, might only play 1 year there. I mean, he's on a 1 year deal right now. Now, if he signs an extension there and he's going to play there for multiple years, then yeah, it pans out. But I'm not sure if that's going to happen. You know, he might get there, hate it, and then next thing you know, he's off to somewhere else next year, and now Houston is gutted, and Houston has nothing in reserve. So, a big question is where do the Clippers go from here? So what do they do now that their leader, Chris Paul, is out? They re-signed Blake Griffin last night, 5 years, $176 million. If I was them, I would not have done that. I don't think Blake Griffin is consistent enough. He's not healthy half the time. He's always hurt. That's not. I mean, I'm not going to spend $30 million, close to $35 million on a guy that I can't trust to be out there all the time. So the Clippers, since they re-signed him, you got to know that they're still trying to win. So they have a nice little roster. I mean, if you look at it, you've got Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, Lou Williams, Patrick Beverley, and then you've got some cap space. If I'm them, I'm going after guys like, I would take a look at Kyle Lowry. I would take a look at maybe Otto Porter, see what other teams are offering them, and see if you can't get them for, you know, a decent little chunk of change. I'm not sure what his asking price is going to end up being. You never know in these kind of situations until it starts playing out. I heard that they're going to bring in Gallinari. I'm not really sure how that helps you beat teams like Golden State, who are super athletic and super versatile. You're going to have DeAndre Jordan, Blake Griffin, and then Gallinari as your front court. I just don't see how that helps you any. So we'll see what they do. They, like I said, losing their star player and what they were able to get back, they're actually, you know, you look at their roster now, I still think they're probably a playoff team, probably an 8th seed, but they could definitely make the playoffs still. When you really start thinking about the Chris Paul side of it and why he left to go to Houston, you got to start thinking to yourself, you know, all I kept hearing forever was that Chris Paul made all these guys better, and, you know, he's such a great leader and can do all these things. Tell me whose roster was better last year. If you just looked at the roster, Houston or the Clippers. I think it's without a question, Houston has a better roster. Clippers couldn't even get out of the first round with one of Utah's best players out for almost the entire series. How is that possible? When you have a team of 3 All-Stars and then J.J. Redick, who is one of the, you know, I think top half shooting guards in the league. You look at guys like, and then you got Jamal Crawford, Austin Rivers is a decent player. How is that team only getting to the first round of the playoffs and getting knocked out every year? They haven't made it to one conference finals. What this means for, you know, is Chris Paul just cursed? Is he a guy that can lead your team, that can make these other guys better? Because he sure couldn't take a group of all-stars anywhere farther than the second round in the time he was there. So let's switch gears and talk about Jrue Holiday. Jrue Holiday signed a 5-year, $126 million contract. That can actually go up to $150 million with incentives, I guess, based on, you know, all-star appearances, all-NBA appearances, stuff like that. This guy is a career 14 points per game, 6 assists a game, and has made 1 all-star team. And he is going to make possibly $30 million a year. What? How in the world is that possible? If you're New Orleans and you're sitting there and you're thinking, okay, Jrue Holiday, I don't care if it's your best option to win. You can find another guy. You could get 2 really good, serviceable players for the amount of money you're paying one guy. So you're telling me that you can't find a guy that can get you 14 points and 6 assists? That shouldn't be too hard to do. I don't understand why these teams get in such a hurry and they overspend for these guys that have no business making this money. You look at guys like Chandler Parsons, who went to Memphis. That contract is going to kill them long term for the next, for as long as he's on their books. That contract is going to kill them and what they can do. Miami's got a young core group of guys, but some of the money they shelled out last year, Tyler Johnson, a guy I've never even heard of, making crazy money. I just don't understand why these teams get in such a big hurry to sign people that they end up overspending and crushing their hopes to build anything for the future. If you lose Drew Holiday, does that kill your chances of competing? No. There's a bunch of other guys out there that you could get that are going to make a lot less money. So, free agency is one of the craziest times of year. I never fully understand what's going to happen, no one could have guessed last night before the news came down that Paul George is going to go to Oklahoma City. I mean, that was not even... I didn't hear one person mention that as a possible destination. And here we go. If you're Boston, normally I would say, man, you got to make a move. You got to do something. You do, but don't sell out everything just to please some writers and some fans. You've come this far. You might as well stick it out a little bit longer. There's no shame in, getting Brooklyn's top 5 pick next year, because they're going to be terrible again. They also have another chance to get LA or Philly's pick for next year or 2019. It's complicated how it's going to work out, but they've still got plenty of assets to make this thing happen. But they better get on the ball and they better start doing something, because they're going to start getting passed by teams that have no business passing them if they don't start being aggressive and trying to win now. You can't sit on tomorrow forever. I was listening to some people, ESPN, which I don't know why, because every guy on ESPN just drives me crazy, especially with their NBA stuff. Brian Windhorst, who I don't know what he has on some of these execs at ESPN, how he still has a job. But he was talking about, should the NBA do away with conferences? And they had a top 16, Mark Stein's top 15 ranked players in his mind in the league, and LeBron was number 1, Kyrie was 15, and then everything else was in the West. In our episode where we talk about NBA rule changes, one of my rule changes was that the NBA consolidates both conferences. You still play your normal schedule, but then when it comes to playoffs, everyone's 1 through 16, so you don't, the fact that you're Boston and you have a crappy roster compared to some of these other top teams, compared to San Antonio, compared to, I think Houston would have beat Boston. I think Utah probably would have beat Boston in a series. That wouldn't happen if you had them ranked 1 through 16, and that's something that I think the NBA should really look at, because the balance of power is just so one-sided. It's not even... LeBron is literally walking into the finals every year. No one is challenging him. And you can say, well, maybe people don't want to go play. No, it's because people in the East don't know what they're doing. And they're afraid to make moves that guys like Daryl Morey in Houston and guys like Sam Presti in OKC aren't afraid to make. That's the difference. So again, NBA free agency still going strong. The Mavs, their big question mark is Nerlens Noel. Apparently he just wanted them to call him last night. He didn't want the whole wine and dine thing. He just wanted to talk to them about what their plans were. I like Noel. I'm not sure I like him at the price that they're going to end up paying for him. But, in today's NBA with the salaries that are going around, who's to say that he doesn't deserve it? If Drew Holiday can get, $30 million a year for 14 points and 6 assists, then I guess Nerlens Noel deserves whatever he's going to get. So I'm really excited to see what some of these teams do to kind of keep up, what the Heat are doing. The Heat's kind of, they're really kind of in the background right now. Nobody's really talking about them a lot, but Pat Riley's working the phones, trying to figure out something and figure out a way. Because if I'm him, I'm thinking, man, I got to go through Cleveland and then maybe Boston. But who else in the East really is strong? Washington's pretty good, but that's it. Like, who else is really there to compete with for playoff spots? I mean, the East is completely wide open. So any team can make one or two moves and be a 4 or 5 seed in the East. And that's not, ridiculous to think or say. So that's my coverage for NBA free agency after day one. So much has already happened. It's going to be crazy all the way through. So tell us what you thought about the episode, what we can do better, anything like that. We are going to be doing once fantasy football starts cranking up, we'll be doing a weekly show talking about who our picks for that week are. We'll be doing a thing on DraftKings and FanDuel, who our picks are, or I will be. I'll see if Mike and JJ can jump in on that and give their takes on that. So let us know how we did, and follow us on Twitter at Board Sports. We also got a website up, boardonthursday.com, so check us out. Let us know what you think. All right, thanks.